17th, 5:33, and we are at the school administrative office. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Mosher,
I'm here.
Ms. Oden,
Here.
Mr. Kaufman, not here. Ms. Raymond,
Here.
Ms. Timmons,
Here.
Ms. Hohensee,
Here.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Here.
Mr. Garino, here. We have a quorum.
Okay. Okay, and we are here for the approval of the 2018 Board of Ed Committee appointments.
I'd like to make a motion to take up business of the day, which is to approve the committee appointments.
Second.
Okay, we need a roll call.
Mr. Mosher,
I'm
Any
here.
comments? We're just passing it without comments?
we are taking up a motion to take up the business of the day. We haven't, this is not to pass it, this is to take up the business of the day. I'll take this motion up. Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Greeno, yes. So this motion is on the table, on the board now.
Okay. Before we begin this meeting, I would like to say I spoke with Attorney Bolton in setting up the workshop for the Board of Education on Robert's Rules and Right to Know. And he highlighted some issues that I should have used at the last meeting. I think one of the most important ones is when a member makes a motion, they are allowed to speak to that first. And then every other member on the committee is allowed to have comment before the person that makes the motion can speak again to that motion. Another thing he pointed out is members should not use another member's name. They should speak to the chair, through the chair. I'm trying to think, I think I left that sheet at home. There was one more, I cannot. Oh, no, it was advice he had given me. My fault, I'm sorry. There was one more, and I can't remember what it was, but I certainly will have it for the next time, but, we will honor that, and, I know what another one is, and I think we all know it. You have to be recognized by the chair in order to speak. We do not want board members interrupting other board members when they have the floor. We are going to be as courteous and as thoughtful as we can be. So, thank you. And we are looking for a motion.
Motion
Miss-
to accept what you just said.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
I second.
Roll call to accept what I just said?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion on the floor to
Could you-
accept what you just said.
What was that,
I
please?
don't
Restate
think we
it.
made a motion. I just clarified how we needed to operate, so I don't think that was a motion. So I
Okay.
am looking for some type of a motion.
Can I interrupt?
I'm sorry, and I should have said, I will, first mention, and it's nice that you're first, Mr. Mosher, the people on the phone will have an opportunity first to make a comment after the motion was made. But Mr. Mosher, do you have a motion?
My comment is on what you said. Having the Roberts rule book right here on my shelf, you're absolutely correct that we are to address the chair when we are speaking, and we are also supposed to let the person who made the motion speak first.
Thank you. So we will, Ms. Van Twyver.
Madam President, I move the adoption of the committee assignments as put in our packet or been revised.
And I second that.
Need a motion by Ms. Van Twyver. Second. And the motion is to accept the committee assignments that were placed in your packets. Discussion? Ms. Johansson?
I have a few comments, but I'd also point out that 5 minutes ago I called Mr. Kaufman, who mistakenly thought it was Thursday because we did get an email with that mistaken date in it, and he will be here in 10 minutes, hopefully, before we close this discussion. As to the negotiations list, I think both Mr. Kaufman and myself had put in for that on our initial sheet of paper. The one we handed in on Monday, the 9th. So, does that mean that, I mean, I can't volunteer for that again, but does that mean we're not welcome to be part of that team?
I think, and I have your sheets here, that you both clarified that you wanted to work on the new administrative
Right.
unit. And neither one of you spoke up at that meeting to say you were going to volunteer for the NTU negotiating team.
Okay, I'm asking now about the Nashua directors, the bottom one on the list, because our names are not on it. And as to the NTU, I pointed out that yesterday I had a conflict in Albany that couldn't be derailed.
Well, I
This-
understand that, that's
okay.
why we did not meet because you had an appointment. The Nashua directors. So you're saying, that you did not reapply for that, but you had on your sheet?
It wasn't reapplied, nobody ever got appointed, this is the first time,
Right,
right? And
right.
both of us put it
Okay.
on our
Yes,
list.
you did. Yes, you did. So Doris will be on there. Could you add, she's absolutely correct. She and Mr. Kaufman had put that there. Doris and Howard. Now, we only really need one on that committee. I'm looking at this. There's Ms. Timmons, who has volunteered for the NTU, and also student board member liaison, although that's does not need board approval. But Ms. Timmons, Mr. Kaufman, or Ms. Hohensie. I don't know how we want to determine which one I appreciate the three of you applying for it, but we only need one.
Can I make a suggestion? What I'm looking at is a very slimmed down negotiating team compared to what we've had before. We used to have 3 members and an alternate on the NTU. Last year we had 3 on the negotiating team, and the directors is new. But I just think that we've passed many contracts like that. I don't understand why we're streamlining. I think it gives better communication to the full board to have more members there, exchange of ideas. I mean, if we have the volunteers, I don't see why we need to streamline those. It just seems to me that it adds more wisdom to the final solution or the final outcome.
There is an explanation, Ms. O'Gara?
So we've always had only one on food service. It's been Elizabeth,
Right.
and one on secretaries,
Right.
and one on custodians. It's
We had 3.
on the
It
custodians
was
sometimes.
Ms. Ziem, Mrs. Oden, and myself last year. And we're in process. That's where it was.
And also the paras only had one. So there were 3 collective bargaining agreements who only had one board member.
Could I please clarify, it's my understanding that before last year, only one person was on the negotiating team with absent or custodians. That had been the past. So that's why we went back to one number.
If I may follow up on
Yes.
that, I just thought that we had 3 last year because it was a difficult negotiation, was very contentious, and we still haven't resolved it in the 2 years that I've been here. So, maybe one when we get it all packaged up. The other thing is, you don't want two, you want an odd number, so you don't get into those tie positions. As we have 9 on the board, 3 on committees, it's usually wise to have an odd number, not an even number. So I guess that's why you go from 1 to 3.
Madam
Ms. Van
President,
Twyver.
I question the, why you need an odd number, because it's not like, why would you need an odd number? You're doing this thing as a committee.
True, but if you look around, the Board of Aldermen has 15, we have 9. Most school boards that are smaller have about 5. If you read Robert's rules, I read in there that it's advisory to have an odd number so that you don't have a lot of tie votes. 5 4s, at least it's not 4-4. If you had 8, it could be 4-4, and then nothing happens. I'm just
Ms. Van
pointing
Twyver?
that out.
But this is negotiations, this isn't committee work, right?
No.
Yes.
Is that what we're
Yes.
talking about?
Yes.
I believe that's what we're, please, everyone. Yes, I believe you're right. We are talking about just negotiations.
Well, I don't see the need for having an odd number.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you, Madam President. Could you clarify for me, on the negotiation, is there voting by the board members? My understanding that it was more of a discussion, but perhaps I'm new, I don't know everything about that yet. And I have a second question as well, with my time. If in the future, schedules change or other board members would like to volunteer in the future for some of these, is that allowed, or is this simply set in stone, and in 3 months if someone has an opportunity, are they able to at that time volunteer or not?
It basically is set in stone for continuity, but my understanding is any member of the board can sit in and listen to some of the discussions that the team is making. I don't know if they can be in with the team you're negotiating with, or the unit, or
Sorry.
I'm sorry, could you, I haven't had the opportunity to get that far on the negotiations. I was on AFSCME, but we didn't have other people that wanted to come. So if you could tell us about that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam President. A couple things. When you start the negotiation process, there are ground rules. And the ground rules are that everyone that's at the table the first time around to establish the ground rules, that's it. There can be no new members that come on board on both sides. So typically for the board involvement, if we can jump to the custodians and ask me. This was a pretty, politicized negotiation. There have been, on both sides, and so there was a great deal of activity of the board members in terms of participation. But, if you want to stick with the odd number, I mean, Mr. Garino is there, that's an odd number. And, in terms of coordinating schedules, ultimately, all of these contracts must be approved by the board. So having 3 people there, doesn't necessarily guarantee that whatever's agreed upon is going to be agreed upon for the full board. As a compromise, there are 3 people that signed up for the directors. There's still no one there for the secretaries. Maybe, Mr. Kaufman would like, I'm just kind of putting out, or maybe Ms. Hohensi might want to consider the secretaries. Could we still need one member to be a part of that? Just a thought.
Thank you very much. Ms. O'Hansi?
In response to that, I think the reason why Mr. Kaufman and myself were interested in that one is because it's a brand new contract. It'd be interesting in it because you're developing all of the contract. You're not just taking the contract and putting it up a notch. And so it was an interesting contract. The other thing about like the custodians, and I'm not saying who has to be on it or not, but there ought to be at least one person on there for continuity. It just helps the other side because now we're bringing them all up to speed for what's been gone back and forth. We're now at impasse. We were supposed to schedule something this month to get back in, at the table. When we did the NTU last year and I anticipated that we might lose some members, I did do that, as Mrs. Hogan said. I came in and sat on the meetings with the attorney. I didn't go in and speak with in the negotiations itself, just to try to get up to speed, so be one more person that would know something going forward, so we don't drop the ball completely and have to start over.
Ms.
Madam
Andrew
President, if we're finished discussing that, I have a question regarding about the teachers also. HC question mark and ZT question mark, what does that imply?
Howard Kaufman, I guess, is a question mark, and Dr. Mose and Ms. Timmons. Do you have any idea, Ms. Timmons, why you're a question mark there? Was it because you had previously?
Yes, Madam President. The reason why I wanted to be on the teachers' negotiation team, because I did have the teachers and the directors because of my previous experience in management.
Mhm.
And because of that, that's why I selected those two positions. I think I have extensive experience in the teachers under negotiation and management and know exactly what we need to further our school along. And that's why I wanted to be on those committees. And I think, in my opinion, there's nobody on this particular board had that experience at all. So, and I have over 40 years experience in management.
Can I ask you, Ms. Timmons, are you in the same situation as Ms. O'Hensey and Mr. Kaufman, in the fact that you had put that down earlier and didn't think you had to resubmit it?
Well, I didn't think I had to resubmit it. I
Okay.
thought, Madam President, I thought that was it. I thought once we get in a negotiating team, that I would choose one that I think would best fit my own qualifications.
Okay, thank you. Let the record show that Mr. Kaufman has arrived.
Excuse me, do you happen to have an extra copy of
We have. This part. This part's on. Don't show me the
Mr. Kaufman, could I just ask you one quick question?
Sure.
Your name is there, HC, under the negotiating team for the teachers union with a question mark?
No, I'll withdraw from that.
You do not, okay. So we have, and Ms. Timmons, your name is there.
Yes.
Is there anybody else who is willing to serve on the NTU committee? They are almost done, is my understanding, and I can give you no information because I haven't been part of any part of the negotiations or the talks about the negotiations. I did briefly attend part of a meeting that talked about the logistics, but I have no idea. So is there anybody who would like to volunteer to be on the negotiating team for the NTU? And that's tomorrow, and they would like to have 3 members.
Just to clarify, so we just need one additional member. So we have Ms. Van Twyver, we have Ms. Timmons, and we just need one more member to join us for tomorrow at 3:30.
3:30 in the afternoon.
No, I can't do it.
I would love to do it, but I can't.
Mr. Mosier, is there any chance you might be able to do that?
At this moment, I don't think so because I have my therapist coming tomorrow.
Okay.
Got my leg.
Dr. McKinney?
Just, Madam President, for clarity, it's tomorrow at 5 p.m.
Oh, at 5,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. If I'm not mistaken, do the ground rules say
Yes.
that, should we not be able to have 3 members, that they would consider 2? Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, so if we're not able to secure the 3 members, we can have a discussion with the NTU side to let them know that has no impact on our ability to negotiate in good faith. It's just that because of the timing of this and the fact we were only able to secure 2 members, given where we're at, I don't anticipate it being a problem. But certainly I think I'll check in with Adam and the leadership.
Okay. So we do have 2 members. I'm looking for custodians and AFSMI. We have Mr. Guarino and Mr. Mosher. We could even pull out of a hat. I think we have some ways to go. I think I would not have said it has been contentious. We just haven't gotten very far with the custodians. I think it's moving along slowly, and but we plan on making some good progress there. So, Mr. Guarino, I'm going to ask you. I know you work in Massachusetts.
Yes.
We often negotiate with the custodians during the day. Will that be a problem for you?
Yes, we will.
Okay. Mr. Mosher, you also signed up for custodians. Will it be a problem for you to make a meeting during the day for the custodians?
Well, it depends on the day, because I do have somebody come in a week.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, did you tell me earlier?
Usually it's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Okay. I guess if Mr. Mosher could do it, we could try to have negotiations with AFSCME on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that he could make it. Would that be appropriate? Mr. Mosher, did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Would that be agreeable to you?
Well, I would, that's agreeable to me. I certainly want to try to do that.
Okay.
But the weather may be a handicap for me.
Well, hopefully the weather's going to get better. So let me ask, is there anybody willing to be an alternate should Mr. Mosher not be able to make it because of the weather in the beginning? Ms. Timmons?
Madam President, I will be an alternate if he's not able to attend, and I don't have scheduling problem during the day.
Okay, thank you.
Madam
Yeah.
President,
I'm sorry.
Pretty good.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Ms. Van Fiver?
I don't know that the alternate needs to attend all the meetings too.
Would that be a problem for you, Ms. Timmons?
No, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. We have nobody who is interested in being the member for the secretaries. I will step up. I will do that. Food service is Miss Van Fiver and Mr. Mosher. From Miss Van Fiver's email, she has already negotiated twice with the food service, I believe.
Yep.
Okay. I think that's wise. Mr. Mosher, you also volunteered for food service, but Miss Van Twyver has already volunteered, negotiated with them twice, and you will be on the custodians. So, would you mind if that position went to Miss Van Twyver?
No, I don't mind.
Okay, thank you. And the Nashua directors, and that's where Ms. Timmons has volunteered, Mr. Kaufman, and Ms. O'Hensey, and we need one member.
I'm certainly willing to do it.
Okay,
Madam President, I did say I would like to be on that negotiation team. The teachers is almost a done deal. So I would like to be on the directors, and I would like to be a person that would see that it go through smoothly without 2 years and into one contract or a bunch of unnecessary verbiage. So I think I would be great on that.
Okay. Ms. O'Hensy, how do you feel?
I would recommend that you put 3 people on it. I don't mean anything negative to Miss Timmons, but it's a whole new process with negotiations, and I think she would benefit having experienced people in there. There's always sharing of ideas, and that there's a lot to discuss in this one. It's not just quick fix and it's on its way. So I would think, if I was board president, I would recommend 3. That's just my.
Ms. Timmons?
Madam President, I am experienced. Okay, I respect her opinion from experience, and I think that I can do this without 2 other people on that.
Mr. Kaufman?
To Ms. Hohensy's point, even having spoken with the attorney about it, there is no contract for the directors at this point in time. Once they elected to become a union, that there is no contract. So they are starting from scratch. I think that's what Mrs. Hohensy was alluding to, that there's a lot more work here than just continuing with a contract and nailing down numbers as it is with the teachers. So I think hands on deck is a good thing.
Anybody else? Mr.
I don't think,
Guarino?
I think we only need 2 people on this, and I think Ms. Timmons has extensive experience, background with contracts and personnel contracts. That's what she did before she was elected to the board. So it's not like she's learning new things as she gets on board. And too many chefs sometimes spoil the soup. So I think keep it simple should be our mantra, and I think we need 2 people.
Any other board member would like to comment on this?
I'll comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mosley. I'm sorry, I forgot you were there.
Motion.
All right, my wife forgets about me too. But I agree with Dr. Mosley that we should keep it simple and just bring in the big guns when we get stuck and we need the help. So yes, I agree with Dr. Mosley that let's try to keep it as simple as possible, and that way we can make more progress and without the personalities who say, well, I can't do that, I can't do this, can't make that one, I can't make the other one. So we always have that extra person that we can bring in when the time comes that we need the help. So keep it simple.
Thank you, and I will clarify, I think it was Mr. Guarino that you were listening to and not Dr. Mosley, just for clarification.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes, thanks. You may want to check with Tom Clausen in terms of what he might be interested in terms of board support. One of the things, the very first year we were on the board, Ms. Hohensy and I were on the contract committee for the teachers. And I can tell you that her ability with mathematics and the numbers was highly appreciated, which I think would add value to this particular contract since we're starting from 0. And I would encourage you to speak to Tom and see what he thinks, if you need 2 or 3 people. Because I think this contract is going to be as important as the teacher contract.
Well, they have recommended, administration has recommended one member, and if you look, here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We now have 5 unions, and there's only one that has 3 members, and at this point, we're gonna have to go down to 2 members. So I don't think 1 member on directors is unreasonable. Is there a motion?
I have a motion on the floor that we have 1 member for the Nashua directors. And I would like to be that member.
I'll second that.
Point of order, we already have a motion on the table.
Amend the motion to.
Well, we amended it for all these other things by hand, so I don't know, I mean, we put in Mrs. Oden for secretaries, we added Gloria for custodians, we've made some changes without motions. I'm just trying to figure out why we need a motion for this and don't need it for those, just for consistency.
I think it would be appropriate to, when we approve this, to approve all 5 of these in one motion. Ms. Van Twyver?
Madam President, I made a motion to accept the committee assignments, so I assume that meant both sides of the paper that we were talking about. I would be willing to withdraw that motion so that we can vote on each section by itself.
Thank you.
And I don't remember who made the motion, the second, but
Who made the second?
remember?
Let's see.
You have this one.
Ms. Timmons.
This one.
I ran out of the house because I thought it was tomorrow, not tonight. It's not busy.
Did you look at your?
Well, anyway, my question is, do you have
Please sit
the...
down.
I'm trying to get a copy.
Excuse me,
Thank
Take
you.
this
point of
one.
order.
I'm sorry.
Point of
Yes,
Point of order,
yes.
one person has the floor at a time.
That's correct,
Ms.
sir,
Van Twyver.
and that means that you do not speak, Mr. Corino.
Okay.
You're the clerk.
Ms. Van Twyver.
Well, I withdrew it,
Okay.
and we just have to ask the second person, the person made the second, if they're willing to withdraw too.
Who is the second?
Ms. Timmons.
Ms. Timmons.
I withdraw.
Thank you.
So we're back to square one, huh?
Yes. Do you have a motion, Ms. Van Twyver?
No.
No? Okay. Okay.
I was willing to do the standing committees, but
Okay.
that's what it,
Ms. Raymond.
I'd like to back up and make a motion that we accept the standing committees and the other committees, because it seems like we are pretty much in agreement on those. That's the first page that we've had for over a week now.
Okay.
And then we can tackle the second page with the negotiations
Okay.
as we move forward.
I second that.
We have a motion on the floor to accept the standing committees as sent out in our packets, so that's on the sheet there. Anybody want, the person of the motion may speak to the motion first?
I just feel like this is something that we've had for over a week. I haven't heard anybody having an issue with any of these standing committees. These are the ones we volunteered for that I think we all got what we asked for. So I feel like at this time we should just go ahead and move that forward so we can then spend our evening productively working on the stuff that requires discussion.
Okay, thank you.
But-
Before I recognize you, I don't want to forget Mr. Mosier on the phone. Mr. Mosier, do you have a commentary or a comment on the motion?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. Relative to the Budget Committee assignment, I did volunteer for that. I would like to do that. I looked and I did not find a precedent in any of the board policies for us to have a co-chair. And I can tell you from my experience in running teams in professional, I'll just say in the private sector, you really can't have 2 heads in the same box leading a team or leading a meeting. You need one chair. And I like the idea of a vice chair or an alternate. I think that's a sound idea. But I would make the case that co-chair in any committee like that would be inadvisable. Because who would lead the meeting? You wouldn't have a clear leadership, wouldn't have a clear leader who would set the agenda, work with the administration to set the agenda, etc. So I would like to do that. I've been on the board 2 years. I've come to know the budget somewhat. Clearly the board's decision. And then if I may also speak to policy assignment.
Can we first get commentary on your first?
Sure.
Is there anybody else that has an opinion on that? I suggested a co-chair, and I don't have a problem, it's a vice chair. But I did that, should you be absent from a meeting, can't make a meeting for some reason, we need somebody to chair that, the budget committee. I also, if you see on the committee assignments, Mr. Guarino is chair of finance. That was his first choice. He's the only one that made that his first choice. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to work with Mr. Donovan, because Mr. Donovan works closely with the budget committee. So that's why I did that. If the word vice chair makes a big difference to the majority of this committee, we can certainly change the wording, but I had suggested that we have a co-chair in case Mr. Kaufman is absent, we have somebody to run the meeting. Ms. Timmons first.
I think we should leave, Madam President, I think we should leave this as is, as chairs, both Mr. Kaufman and also Mr. Guarino.
Thank you. Ms. O'Hensy?
I think it should be a vice chair. I think historically we've had a vice chair. And if it was supposed to be co-chairs, it would have been Mr. Kaufman co-chair, Mr. Guarino co-chair. So in a sense, it is a vice chair. I think it would be more appropriate.
Is there anybody that has a problem changing the verbiage from co-chair to vice chair?
I do.
Okay, thank you for speaking up, Mr. Kaufman. Mr. Mosher. Sorry.
Yes, if you look at your assignment to committee, you have a chair, and this is always, even in the legislation, that the first name on the list is the chairman. Second named on there will be the one to step in as a alternate to the chair. Should the chair be unable to perform on that particular day, the second name will conduct the business of the committee. That's the way it works in the House of Representatives.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Guarino.
I agree with Mr. Mosher that it's perfectly clear that Mr. Kaufman is the chair and I will be co-chair, and to just step in when he's not able to do it. I don't think we need to change anything. I'd like to bring this to a vote as soon as we can.
Yes, Madam President, I think it should be vice chair. Co-chair says that you're working in conjunction. You both have some responsibility for things. And I was trying to think what Mr. Hallowell and Mr. Farrington did. I don't think Mr. Farrington stepped in because he was president. I think he stepped in because he was vice, but I don't remember how we listed him on the sheet. You know, our regular committee sheet that we have posted on the website. So, but I think it should be a vice chair. I don't think it should be co-chair. The terminology.
Ms. Timmons?
Madam President, I looked up the definition of co-chair. It's a person who is in charge of a meeting or organization jointly with another or others.
Jointly. Not good.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion. We should have had a motion before the discussion, but,
I
We
move,
did. We
I
did have a
move to
motion.
change co-chair to vice chair.
okay.
second,
Wouldn't that be an amendment to the current motion?
It would be an amendment to the current motion to accept.
I will with,
no,
No, it's
this
amendment.
is a seven,
It's amendment.
I'll just leave it.
yeah, just leave it, I'll just leave it. Straight, Mrs. President?
Pardon? If you could read the amendment back, and I will repeat it for Mr.
Sure.
Mosher.
Sure. The amendment is to, on the current motion to accept the standing committees, is to change the name of the co-chair to vice chair under the budget committee.
Okay, you've all heard the motion.
Second.
Mr.
And the amendment.
Okay,
Second that
Mr.
amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Mosley, Mr. Mosher, did you hear?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
That's acceptable because, as a vice chair, as was in my committee work in Concord, that was always the way it worked. The second name was the vice chair.
okay, thank you. I'm not sure, I don't know if the state legislature works under Robert's rules, but I
It does not.
It does not, it's Mason.
I think we all understand the responsibility of either the co-chair or the vice chair, so. Roll call.
Excuse me, point of
Okay,
order.
Sorry, just a minute, I'm sorry, excuse me.
We have a motion that's to accept all the standing committees.
No, we have a motion to accept the standing committees with, it's amended, with an amendment to change, the co-chair to vice chair.
Okay.
So
clarification.
on the motion, Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Wait,
Yes,
Clarification.
Ms. Oden.
Excuse me, just a minute.
We're voting,
Mr. Kaufman?
I just want to be clear, we're voting on the amendment to change the word co to vice.
yes.
Right.
And we will have a subsequent discussion on additional committee assignments based on the other motion that is previous. Thank you.
Are we voting on the amendment or the motion?
The amendment.
We're voting on the amendment. Okay, we are voting on the amendment to change, budget, co-chair to,
Who's here?
the vice chair. Okay, Mr. Mosher.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes,
Mr. Greeno, yes. So the motion is amended.
Madam Chair, just
Yes.
a point of clarification, so we don't revisit it. Is it Mr. Kaufman who's the chair, and Mr. Garrido who's the vice chair?
Yes.
Yes.
Because Mr. Farino was listed as co-chair. So that we have changed the word, we didn't change the positions, we only changed the wording. Okay. Looking for a motion?
no, oh, excuse me.
I would like to bring this motion to a vote. The motion to accept the standing committees as amended.
Ms. Van Twyver, had you withdrawn that motion?
No.
No, we
That was,
this is Ms. Raymond's motion
Right, she
to
was-
accept the
okay.
standing committees, and then we
Okay,
just
yes.
amended it. But
Okay.
I'd like to bring that to a vote.
Okay.
proper
I was
terminology,
assured I
I
would
moved
have
to
a chance to
previous
address.
question.
Pardon? Ms.
Excuse me,
Van Twyver, just a minute. Ms. Van
The
Twyver?
proper motion is, I move the previous question.
I move the previous question. Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Mr. Kaufman?
Second,
I was,
Oh, I'm sorry.
is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, now you can talk about it.
thank you, I had previously requested the opportunity to speak to this, and I was assured by the chair that I was able to do that. In my other comment, you asked me to wait because you wanted to do the budget
Yes.
amendment first.
Mhm.
May I speak to one other committee?
I'm sorry, but the person who made the motion may speak to it first.
That's Ms. Raymond.
Okay.
Okay?
I don't have any other commentary on my motion at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We
Then-
moved the previous question, that means you have to take a a vote on moving the
Moving the
previous
question.
question means that you have to take a vote on whether you wanna go ahead and vote on the complete thing as it has been amended.
Thank you. And
Got
my
it?
understanding is that needs a 2/3.
That's a 2/3 vote, that's correct.
Vote. Okay. Do you understand what we're doing, Mr. Mosher?
I certainly do.
Okay, thank you. Roll call?
Keep the scorecard.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
No.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee,
No.
Ms. Van Twyver,
No,
Mr. Garino, yes. 5 out of 8.
motion is carried.
No, it failed.
Now, 5 and
5
8,
and 8.
that, now you have to
It's-
take the vote.
It's
On-
15 and a third, so it didn't pass.
Didn't?
No, it did not pass.
Oh, okay.
It needed 6.
You needed 6 to pass and you didn't have, can you, Mr. Garino, would you please state the results?
Results are 5 yes, 3 no.
So now,
You're one short.
Motion
one
motion
short.
fails.
So I
Mr.
guess,
Kaufman.
Raise your hand. Mr.
I did,
Yeah.
actually. I guess I move to accept the standing committee assignments as presented, and I would like to speak to my motion.
We have a
already-
motion on the
I
floor.
second
No,
the
it
motion.
was defeated.
No, that was
I second the
that was the
motion.
motion to require
Oh,
a
gotcha.
vote
Sorry,
right
sorry.
now.
My confusion, I'm sorry. May I speak to the motion? And
Let's
Wait.
clarify this first. You just made a motion to accept the standing committees, is that correct?
I withdraw that. Ms.
You
Van
withdraw
Twyver is
that.
correct because
Okay.
the other motion, we voted to call the question and we said we didn't want to
Didn't
do
want
that.
it.
So the
So
other motion's still there.
What
Sorry.
motion is on the floor? Can you
Motion,
read
the
that,
motion is
please?
the motion on the floor is to accept the standing committees with one amendment. The amendment is to change co-chair to vice chair under the budget committee.
And the other.
Okay. Okay. Does everybody understand? Okay, thank you, Mr. Kaufman.
Yes, so I would like to discuss the assignments on the policy committee. The submission that I made was to be chair of that committee. And I'm probably responsible for most of the backlog in the policy committee. I got pretty active over my vacation and submitted a whole bunch of stuff to the committee. One of the reasons why I did that was obviously those were in response to things I've observed at the district. Considering,
Point of order.
excuse
Point of
me,
order.
I have the floor.
How many, yeah, but point of order, how many amendments can we make to a motion?
Well, we want to keep it to 2.
Point of
before it gets
order,
too-
I can interrupt.
You can-
I just want to know how many times we can amend the
Point
original
of
motion.
information. you
Point of
can-
information, I apologize.
You can interrupt.
Is Ms. Van Twyver going to be our
I-
I
parliamentarian?
just want to find out how many times
Ms.
we can
Van
amend.
Twyver
the
would like
motion.
not to be. I would like everybody to be educated in it,
It's gonna
but
take a
I-
while.
Definitely.
yeah, I know.
I think until we have the meeting, this is why I wanted a workshop with Attorney Bolton. I think at this point, we need to work to make sure we appoint committees because we have a negotiating committee that has to be in place tomorrow. So we do have to pass these committees, and I would like us to have just a little bit more flexibility. It's tough. A lot of us are new. I'm new at running this. I thank Ms. Van Twyver for her help. So if we could let Mr. Kaufman continue, and we can go on and do the business that we need to do at this meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, like I was saying, I expect to produce more policy recommendations to bring to that committee. we haven't seen Mr., quite frankly, and no disrespect to Mr. Mosier, but we haven't seen him in 7 months. His health has kept him away from attending meetings in person. And
Excuse
it's
me, you weren't here.
Please don't interrupt.
No, you weren't here for the beginning of the meeting. You
No.
are not allowed to use another member's name during a board meeting. You're to speak through the chair, and I got this information out of Robert's rules and confirmed it with Attorney Bolton. But during a meeting, and I'm sorry you weren't here in the beginning, but you cannot use another member's name.
Okay, fine.
Okay, thank you.
So, my concern is the attendance of everybody at this. I'm concerned that it's my understanding for a team, for one of these meetings to work, that the chair should be present in the room to be able to acknowledge the people who are attending. And I think it would be very difficult if the chair happened to be remotely connected to the meeting. I think that would make for a very difficult meeting. And I would ask that the board consider that in formalizing this particular assignment, and I would request an amendment to change the chair to myself, Mr. Kaufman.
Does anybody else want to add to this discussion?
I'll
second the motion for the
Need a
purpose of
second.
discussion.
Thank you.
Oh, no, Dr. Mosley has some.
No, I'm good.
Ms. O'Hansey?
To Mr. Kaufman's point, I was going to ask a similar question. I don't understand how anyone can chair a committee if they're not physically present in the room to see who's got their hand up, who wants to speak. I don't think I could chair a committee via the phone, so I think it's a reasonable request.
Anybody else? Excuse me, before we do that, Mr. Mosher, do you want to make commentary?
Well, I'm thinking about it, and I think that there are powers afoot there that may be looking to usurp the power that goes with being a chair. However, give the post-chair opportunity to show that he or she is able to conduct the policy committee, not necessarily remotely, but by direct attendance, because as named so far, I would be the chair. But if I relinquish it, I would make a recommendation to to appoint somebody else. That somebody else would be my choice. So yes, give the chair a chance to recuperate, because this is a difficult time when you have a number of things that, and like remember the movie Westworld? Nothing can go wrong. And that's why here we can give the opportunity for the healing to take place while we get ready to go into active duty there as a chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Van Farger.
I'd like, Madam President, to inquire from the previous speaker how soon he thinks he would be back to attend in body.
Mr. Mosher, I think that is directed to you.
Sorry, unforeseen circumstances. By the time that we are ready to go with the committee, which would be another week or 10 days, might be able to do it by then. Depends on how my body responds to the treatment.
Ms. Van Twyver, you have follow-up?
Yes, Madam President, I'd like to, maybe we could consider putting Mr. Kaufman, I'm not supposed to use his name, as a temporary chair until Mr. Mosier comes back? Would that be a solution to the problem?
I think in the past what has happened, if somebody is not there, that the next person stands up. If somebody's on vacation, the next person on the committee does become chair. And if it's a matter of Mr. Mosier not being there but being able to call in, he's still a member of the chair. But I don't think we need to do that, quite frankly.
Okay.
Okay?
Just a suggestion.
Thank you, Mr.
I think,
Carino?
it's evident that, the way you have it, he's willing to, be, chairman of the committee, and he's willing to come back, so I don't, see any need for any change.
Ms. Timmons?
I do have a question regarding illnesses. If I so happen to chair a committee and get sick, do that mean that I do not chair that committee? Are you penalizing people for being temporarily sick? I have no problem with Mr. Mosier fulfilling that particular position as chair. If that's the case, he's still part of the Board of Education. He should be allowed to continue as we have, he had required to step up to chair that committee. I don't think it's fair to penalize somebody simply because they're not able to make a meeting, or several meetings for that case.
Ms. Raymond, you haven't spoken. Would you like to speak to this issue? You don't have to. I'm trying to make sure we follow the rule that every person on the committee has a chance to speak before the person who made the motion speaks again.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm happy to be on this committee. I do appreciate the effort that has gone into the committee assignments as I'm reviewing them. It looks like you have tried to make sure that there are no repeat chairs, that everybody has an opportunity to chair something as opposed to having one person chair multiples. And I think that's fair, and I appreciate the thought and the effort. As for who is chair of this particular one, I don't have an opinion either way.
Okay. I will speak to this. I think what we have done in the past, if somebody cannot make a meeting, that doesn't mean that they cannot be chair. I know Mr. Mosier has been out recuperating after two setbacks, after an accident and then a setback from that accident. He is getting physical therapy. He told me 3 days a week. And I think if he cannot do the committee assignment, if he cannot come back in a reasonable time, he will look to resign the chairmanship. Is that my understanding, Mr. Mosier?
Yes, absolutely correct.
Thank you.
May I add that we've had this situation
I'm
before.
sorry, just a minute. You have spoken, I have spoken, and so the motion the speaking opportunity goes back to Mr. Kaufman at this point, as he was the maker of the motion and everybody at the table has spoken. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mrs.
Kaufman?
Orden. Yes, I just would like to point out that this policy assignment is my only assignment on this grid. And that Mr. Mosier has another assignment. And I would also point out to the committee that Mr. Mosier has other assignments far more than I. So we're asking a lot of Mr. Mosier. You have him down for the JSSBC, the construction committee, custodians later on, food service, and again, health and wellness. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He has 7 assignments, and I have 1. So perhaps maybe the committee chair responsibilities on this one could relieve him a little bit of the others.
Mr. Mosier volunteered for the joint special. He's been on that for years, construction. We only had the same number as we needed positions. We were lucky enough to fill those with the exact number of people who applied for it. And let me say, you also are chair of budget. That was a request of yours.
Yes,
You
it
were
was.
appointed to policy, and you only gave me 2 choices. On your preference sheet, there were 4 choices. You gave me 2 choices. So I tried to work with what I had.
I actually gave you, well, 2 committees I gave you, and I gave you budget. I gave you 3 choices, yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
in the sake of process and time, a couple of things I just would, there's a motion on the floor that Mr. Kaufman made around removing or maybe being the policy chair for the policy committee. I don't know if the board needs to vote on that and then vote on the entire standing committee, so I
Yes.
think that motion is still active. Just want to say for the public in general, and just remind what Madam Chair has said, not to be critical of other board members, not to be critical of what they are doing and what their time, and certainly be respectful of their circumstances.
So, Mr. Carino, could you read the motion on the floor, please?
I need some clarification. So we have a motion to accept the standing committees, and it was amended to take out co-chair and put vice chair for budget.
Right.
And this motion of Mr. Kaufman to become chair of the policy, is that part of that motion, or is that a separate motion?
It's a separate.
It's a separate motion, thank you.
And it has to
Thank
be
you.
seconded.
Okay, and it
Ma-
was seconded by Ms.
Madam
Owens.
President.
It was seconded by Ms. Owens.
Or Mrs. Ventura, we
I
simultaneously.
think Ms. Van.
Oh, Ms. Van Twyver seconded.
Once you amended a main motion, it becomes part of that motion.
Right.
Okay?
Because we can only entertain one, excuse me.
It's
I
part of the
believe-
main motion, so you don't have a sub-motion on the floor right now.
Mine was an amendment to the,
Excuse me,
Okay.
an
Excuse
amendment.
me. Yeah. There is a motion on the floor with an amendment.
No, we're voting on an amendment
An amendment
to the main
to
motion.
the main motion that is,
This would be amendment number 2.
No, it's not.
No.
It's amendment number 1 now, because the first one passed
The first
and
one
became
passed.
part
Got
of the main motion.
and that first motion is to make co-chair, vice chair. That wordage.
And
That verbiage?
And that passed.
And that passed.
Yes.
Okay, so that is part of what we're working on.
I was under the impression that we can entertain one motion at a time on the table, and what Mr. Kaufman had amended, or what he had proposed to become chairman. That's why I wanted clarification, whether that's an amendment to the motion that we're considering, because we can only consider one motion at a time on the table. So that's why I want clarification as to this change in the that he's proposing for policy chair. So I'd like some clarification, whether that's an amendment to the motion or is it a separate motion?
I believe it's a separate
may I just-
motion.
No, it isn't.
No? Okay, Ms.
You
O'Henry.
had a main motion, and we amended it once successfully. Now we have another amendment on the table. And we could keep on doing that until we've satisfied everybody's concerns. So this is the second amendment. The first one was absorbed into
Right.
the motion.
Okay,
This one can either pass or fail. If it fails, it's gone. If it passes, it becomes part of the motion.
right, okay,
So we're amending it piecemeal.
okay.
Thank you.
call the question?
You may speak again.
No, I just want to vote. I don't want to speak to the amendment on the floor. I move to call the question.
I move the previous question.
Move the previous question. Thank you, Mr.
Just to clarify, the amendment that's on the table right now is to have Mr. Kaufman nominate himself to be the chairperson of the policy.
Yes,
And that's what's being part of this amendment right now.
right.
And I will clarify that. The amendment on the table, made by Mr. Kaufman, is to, remove Mr. Mosher as Chair of Policy, and appoint Mr. Kaufman to the Chair of Policy. We'll take a vote.
Mr. Mosher,
No.
Ms. Oden,
No.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
No.
Ms. Timmons,
No.
Ms. Hohensee,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
No.
and Mr. Guarino, no. So the amendment is not carried.
The motion fails, the amendment fails, 6-2. Ms. O'Hensy?
I put in 3 requests, 2 for standing committees and 1 for the negotiations. I've gotten none, and that's fine. That's the luck of the draw. But I don't wish to serve on finance. I don't wish to serve on JSSBC. These are not areas that I have experience or expertise, and I would prefer not to be on those. I question what usefulness I will have on the last committee, but that's a longer debate, and I don't know that anybody wants to go into that.
I'm looking for your sheet. I thought you had volunteered
There's a blue sheet
Right.
right next to you
that.
on the table.
What happened was, and I do want to clarify, you got your first choice of committee. You put Human Resources,
Chair.
but we do not ask for chairs.
Right, I know.
That's my responsibility as president of the board. So you did receive your first choice. You also only put 2 preferences down, so that's all I had to work with. And I put you on finance because I have worked with you on AFSCME, and I know that you have outstanding mathematical ability. And that's why I put you on finance, because I only had 2 requests from you.
I minimized my requests because I didn't want to overload. If I got the committee's assignments I wanted, I'd be more forthcoming. I see that you've put inexperienced people in over experience, and that's your prerogative. I was on HR before, and other than the chair, there's really little activity that's done in that committee. It's pretty much approving lists of people that you never see in person and don't even know who they are. Only the chair of that committee gets in on some interviews, and that was my goal. So as it stands, I got none, and I am asking that I be taken off the finance and the JSSBC, and I wouldn't mind if I got off HR. What I did put in for the director's negotiation, I put that in early, but I don't want to be on that as 1 member, so I'm happy to be off. I like that to be 3, because I don't feel that I should force any contract on the board. I'd rather consult as I did it, so I'm sorry.
Okay, so you do not want to be on finance.
No.
You do not want to be on human resources, and you do not want to be on the joint special committee?
Correct.
Okay. I don't know if we need a vote to remove names. Maybe we could do it by consensus. Does anybody have a problem with Ms. O'Hensy being removed from those committees? Ms. Van Twyver?
Would that leave her without any participation? Our policy says that you have to be on 1 committee. Does it? I don't think so. I don't think so. We're here to serve.
I'm ready to serve.
Well, then I
Ms. O'Hensy, all I can tell you is your first choice was human resources, and I gave that to you. Every member on this board received their first choice, and I thought we were very fortunate to have that. Because you asked for chair, doesn't mean that.
I understand that, I accept that.
So, okay,
But
would you like to be on human resources?
No, I would not.
Okay. What committee would you like to be on that needs somebody on it?
They're all full. I
Okay.
don't, I'm not asking to bump anybody. I don't know that that would be fair either.
Well, Mr. Guarino,
Madam Chair, I think that we should allow her to do what she wants, and we can, if later on she decides that she wants to join a committee through the president, maybe she can join a committee if she feels differently later on. But I think for the sake of moving things, that we can, as you want by consent, let her resign from these committees.
Ms. O'Henty?
Madam President, I believe that in the first 2 years I've participated a lot, and I see myself as coming to curriculum and policy on a regular basis as I have been. There's no space to get a vote to be on the committee, but I can still participate. I can still participate as the full board. I just don't want to be forced to participate on committees that I don't have an interest in and overlooked where I did have an interest. I see that you put a lot of inexperienced people as chair. That wasn't done in my first 2 years. If you think that is advantageous to the board and that's fine. That's your call.
Ms. Van Twyder?
Madam President, I take exception with the former speaker's statement about taking a situation that you're not interested in. I did a lot last year that I wasn't interested in, like the JSSB. And we're here to serve. And if your president asks you to do something, I think that you should be grand enough to accept it and do it. I personally was overworked last year, I thought. I was asked to do too many things because some people didn't want to do them. And I don't know who you're going to put in for finance and ops. If you take me and put in the alternate, then you're building my task load up again, which I will do if you ask me to do that. But my health is such that I've had a lot of trouble this year, just beginning 2018. So I'm not sure how, my health is going to go, and I would like to keep my nights out and my workload a little bit lower than what I had last year.
I certainly understand that, and I want to thank you for volunteering to step up to something you didn't apply for, because that is very gracious, so thank you. Is there anybody who hasn't spoken who would like to speak to this motion?
I don't think I spoke to it, but
No,
I'd like
you
to
haven't.
speak to it. Well, Madam President, I think we're here for one purpose only, and that's for the school and the kids in the school, and to help the school move forward. I think it's selfish for anybody to say, if I don't get my choice, then I don't want any. That's just my opinion. And we're here for one reason only, to move, not to dictate, not to say, well, this is what I want, and if I don't have it, then I don't want anything. I don't think that's right.
Yes.
Point of order, I didn't hear anybody make a motion. Maybe I missed it. Not the president.
I think we were talking about the amendment
An amendment to the motion. I didn't hear
to
anybody.
the motion.
make
It
an
was
amendment.
second.
It was?
It
Okay.
was seconded, I believe, by
I thought you said by consensus.
by consensus to
By
remove
consensus,
that.
okay.
Yeah, so I don't
Which
think
is
we have to
okay.
vote on it.
Okay.
I think by consensus, we have accepted the fact that Miss Ho-Pensy, although she received her first choice of committee, does not want to serve on any of the committees I've placed her on. So,
Okay, and also, okay. Okay, and I just want to make one more observation that we will have a new board member coming on.
yes.
So, Ms. Van Twyver will get help if she needs help, because we have a new board member coming on, and I'm sure that person will step into some of these spots.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Guarino. That's an excellent point. Okay, looks like nobody else has a comment. Looks like we should hold a vote on the motion, and the motion is,
The motion is to accept the standing committees as amended. This, the co-chair of the budget committee becomes vice chair. Ms. Hohensee is not on finance, operations, human resources, and the JSSBC.
special. Okay,
And that's it. I believe.
Does everybody, has everybody heard the motion and understand what we're voting on? Mr. Mosher, do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You have a question, Mr.
I have
Kaufman?
a quick comment.
Comments are over. We're moving the motion. We're ready for the vote.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
No.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver.
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. The motion carries 7-1. The motion is adopted.
Looking for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
No, you
No,
can't.
oh, I'm sorry. No.
Sorry. Point of order. You still have these other ones
Yes,
to
that's right.
resolve,
I'm sorry.
unless you want to skip
Okay.
them, which I thought was urgent.
No, we certainly need to go forward. We have teachers, the NTU, we have Miss Van Twyver and Miss Timmons. For custodians, we will have Mr. Mosher, and the alternate, should he not be able to make it, is Miss Timmons. Mr. Guarino had volunteered for it, but because he cannot make it during the day when they negotiate, we will not consider him for that position. He has withdrawn from that. I will negotiate with the secretaries, the food service. Ms. Van Twyver and Mr. Mosher both volunteered. Ms. Van Twyver has negotiated twice with the food service, and she feels very comfortable, and Mr. Mosher agreed to withdraw from that. And the directors, there's one member needed. We have Ms. Timmons and I believe Mr. Kaufman had volunteered and Ms. Hohensee. So we only need one member for that. How we want to determine that, I want to be as fair as possible. Mr. Guarino?
I would like to speak to that. I would recommend that Ms. Timmons be the member that's on that,
Okay.
and have Mr. Kaufman as an alternate.
Are you making a motion?
I would like to make a motion to do that.
Okay. Why don't you repeat it?
I'm sorry. I'd like to make a motion to have Ms. Timmons as the member for negotiation for the directors, and Mr. Kaufman as an alternate.
Do I have a second? I have no second, sorry. Ms.
I
Hohensee?
move to make Ms. Timmons on the committee, and also myself and Mr. Kaufman to have 3 people, an odd number. It's a new contract. It's gonna need a lot of hands-on deck.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Hohensee, you made that motion. Do you want to speak to it?
I believe it's a new contract. You have to look at it from top to bottom. I think it's, I don't think it's appropriate to send any person in there, experienced or not. It's not a question of that. I think it's a bigger undertaking, and I think it would be advantageous to the board to have more than one person. And I think an odd number is again advantageous, so 3, that's how we've done it in the past. Usually an odd number, 1 or 3 or.
Thank you. Before anybody else speaks, why it's on my mind. Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
do you have any comment on the motion?
A motion, clarify the motion for me, please.
Would you clarify the motion for Mr.
Yes.
Mosher?
Mr. Mosher, the motion is to amend the number of members needed for negotiation with the Nashua directors to include Ms. Timmons, Mr. Kaufman, and Ms. Hohensee. Have 3 people.
Can you clarify that the administration?
And the administration is requesting one person.
So do you have a comment on that, Mr. Mosher, or would you like me to come back to you?
Yeah, I'd like it to come back to me on that.
Okay, thank you. Did you have your hand?
No, I agree that the 1 member is needed. You don't need 3 people to go over a contract. You don't. If a person know what they're doing and what they can, anybody that's this department or anybody, they can do this without 3 people. That's just ridiculous.
Mr. Kaufman and then Ms. Van Flyver. Mr. Kaufman?
To the previous speaker's comment, there is no contract. There is no review or modification of an existing contract. There is no contract. It's starting from ground zero to be created. So your comment about, updating or modifying an existing contract is simply not, in fact, the case in this particular instance.
Haven't we said that?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, we have to give everybody a chance at the table to speak to it before somebody can speak a second time, starting with the motion maker. Ms. Van Twyford, you haven't spoken to this.
That's right. I'm inclined to vote for this. Both Doris and Howard have done extensive research on the NTU contract. They did an awful lot of work on it. And to sort of keep the peace, I will vote for this. 3 people.
Anybody else? Can I speak to it?
Sure.
Yes.
You haven't spoken to it, Mr. Polino, have you?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I think we should take it, the administration's recommendation. We only need 1 person, and whether we have a contract or we don't have a contract, that's irrelevant. We have an experienced person that's going to lead negotiations. So I am going to not vote to have 3 people. 3 people, it's just we tend to get bogged down, and we need to get things moving. We have the business of the Board of Education is the business of educating our kids and get things moving. We don't need to add more bureaucracy and more stopgaps in it. And I think having 1 person is wise to do that. Wise way to go. So.
You spoke to Ms. Van Twyford. I wanted to go back to Mr. Mosher to have a chance. Mr. Mosher, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'll speak to it. I agree that we only need 1 person. And that's what I'll vote for.
Okay, and I'm going to speak. After trying to set meetings up this past week has taken me hours because people can't make it, people can make it. When we're negotiating with people, we have to have somebody dedicated to that. And the more people you have, the much more difficulty you have in setting a meeting. So I am going to support administration's request for 1 member on this committee. Okay, just a minute. Doris, you made this motion. Everybody has spoken. Would you like to speak again to this motion?
Certainly. I'm just speaking from the experience I had on the NTU and the ASME. When you go in the first time to any of these negotiations, you bring experience. That's great. But there's a lot that you have to learn. There's history. Even when you read the entire contract, sometimes it's beneficial to go back a couple of contracts to see what evolved over time, to know which way things are moving, to know which are sensitive issues with the group that you're negotiating with. I find that the union is far more prepared than we are. Because we've got 6 or 7 unions, they've got 1. And I think it's a monumental task for a small negotiating team. It's not to say that any one person is not good enough. It's just to say that I benefited from the other people on the NTU team that had history with some of these different issues. And it's not just with this directors group, because you'll need history on what some of the other groups do, so you're equitable to those other groups. There's a lot of different factors to consider. If we go with one, that's the will of the board. And I'll accept that. I think it'd be beneficial to the board and the district to have 3, but this board seems to like streamlining things and delegating a lot of, this delegates more authority over to the administration. Mm-hmm. Instead of the board taking that, it's just saying, well, the administration wants 1, we'll give them 1, which means that one person goes in as a negotiating team with half a dozen administrators, so they're doing more of the work than if we set a full team. So if whichever way this board wants to go, that's the consensus, and that's the way I'll go.
Ms. Aguirre, you wanted
I-
to speak to this?
Yes, yes, Madam President. I just wanted to point out that the directors are presently being employed under the non-affiliated handbook until, and the principals also were under the non-affiliated handbook. And if you look at the principal contract, there was a lot of things that they liked about what they had in the non-affiliated. It's just that they had concerns, and so they formed a union. And so did the directors, they had concerns and they formed a union. It's not so much that they already have a set of benefits and that are much like the principals. Just pointing
Mr.
out.
Cochran, you had your hand up, and then
Excuse me, Madam President, you didn't recognize me, I had my hand up.
I'm sorry, Ms. Van Carver.
I'd like to ask our HR director, who I believe was involved with the principal's contract. You were not?
No.
Do you remember who was on that committee at the time?
I believe Mr. Conrad and Mr. Donovan were on that committee, but if you look at that contract, you will find that it is very similar to the non-affiliated benefits.
I didn't ask that, Mrs.
I'm sorry.
O'Gara.
Okay.
I asked if you remember who was on that committee.
I was not on that committee. Mr. Conrad and Mr. Donovan were on that committee.
Nobody from the board?
I was not on the committee.
For the principal
Who
contract?
signed, for the
Yes.
principal's contract, who signed the original contract?
So just for clarification purposes, traditionally, there's been just one board member for the principal contract. And as we talked about the last time, that started to facilitate with the former board president and myself. So it was the former board president and
So Mr.
superintendent.
Farrington was the one.
Just, can I just finish, please? So I can just make
Sure.
my point. Typically for the principal contract, it's been the superintendent, the board chair, and representatives from the principals. So it's typically the senior member of the leadership team, which is this case Mark Lucas, that represents the elementary school. And for this case, it was Keith Richards, who is from the high school. So the 4 of them sat down and they worked out the contract for the principals, and that's usually a multi-year contract. That has been traditionally done in the district, and it has started actually this year. So that process has continued on for the principal contract. For the director's contract, that has never really been discussed in terms of continue on having one board member representation for those contracts. So just a point of clarification, the question to the board would be, the motion is, so to speak, one person versus 3? And then the decision would have to be which person if it's 1 or which person if it's 3. So maybe that would be a better point of order.
So, Dr. Mosley, you're telling me you do not know who signed the principal's contract.
The board, so when
From the
contract, you
Or
asked me a
the-
question, I'm gonna answer it, please. Once no contract goes into effect until the entire board agrees on the contract.
I
So-
understand that.
No,
Go
I
on.
am just trying to answer your question,
Dr.
Ms.
Mosley, you
Vivian,
have
that's
the
why.
floor.
So, once the contracts are signed, the board chair signs off on those contracts. That's what has been traditionally done. So are there exceptions to that? Absolutely. So for instance, the former board chair had a conflict of interest because he had someone working within the district. So that case, I believe, another board member signed off on the contract because of that conflict of interest. It's not a big deal, but sometimes that happens if it's a conflict of interest for the para contracts that were passed. So traditionally what happens with this is that no contract, NTU, directors, principals, or anything, will ever get approved unless the entire board has been, can vote on it. One person can bring a contract that can be rejected to the board. 3 people there can bring a contract rejected to the board. In terms of planning and getting these contracts settled before they expire, and just to the board, the Madam President's point, getting 3 people's coordinated schedule. And now we're in February because, given the timing we're at right now, the board and the administration needs to start to streamline this process so that we can start to really make some progress. Because I don't think it's can I just be very clear? I don't think we're dealing with people's livelihoods. We're dealing with people who have families out there, people who are watching us right now. And we are here as a new board, standing on the precipice of sitting here, going back and forth about people getting paid in this district. People that have to make mortgage payment, people that shop at the same places we shop at every single day at Market Basket. And I don't think it's appropriate to make them wait any longer for us to come to the table and have a discussion with them. I think we have to start treating people in this district as if they're human beings. Treating these teachers, treating all these administrators, not that there's some piece of paper, but they are in front of our kids every single day. And I encourage this board to be sensitive of time. But also when we're doing these contract negotiations, we're not starting from scratch for these human beings, our directors, who are here in this building on a snow day to make sure that every single email has been answered. So I encourage the board to please let us start this process with just one person so that we can get the business done that needs to be done in this district.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. So, as far as scheduling goes, I can tell you, having been on the NTU committee for 2 years, where we have at least, 8 or 9 people from the union, including somebody who comes in from out of state, as well as, there were 4 members on the board, in addition to all the administrators here tonight, plus Mr. Donovan. And quite frankly, we never had a problem coordinating. People understood it was a priority. It was an important task. And I think the presence of additional beyond 1 member shows the commitment of the board to ensure that it's a well-informed negotiation process. And I actually, 3 heads are better than 1 in that idea. No disrespect to anybody, but I can tell you, when I participated in the NTU, credit goes to Mr. Farrington. His insight in terms of how a grid works and understanding the nuances of it, or what the union mindset is, which for someone who hasn't been in an employee union before, was invaluable. And if if he wasn't there, that would be a loss. So I learned a lot observing from people with experience. I think the 3-person proposal demonstrates, to Dr. Mosley's point, a commitment by the board that we want to ensure that we put forward the best and most comprehensive. We're serious about making it happen. Not to say 1 person doesn't imply that, but 3 people committing. We've committed before. We were on the NTU negotiation team for a year. lots of effort went into that, and if it's a question about making meetings, you can go back and look at our record. We're very responsible. I apologize for being late tonight. I got confused. I received an email that said this meeting was tomorrow at 4:30. So once I was informed, but we'll make the meetings, and we are always prepared for when we come into a meeting.
Well, can I just respond as chair? We had a very important negotiation session scheduled for yesterday. And I had a lot of difficulty setting up a meeting to get the negotiating team together. So there have been problems. The more people you have, the tougher it is. And in your response to the date of the meeting, that I believe that email was from last week when we had attempted to set up a meeting, which would have been on Friday, not Thursday, but I don't remember sending any email out on Thursday.
I'll send it to you, Mrs.
The
Oden.
calendar is here, but it is
7:05.
7:05, and finance was supposed to meet at 7. So I would like to wrap this up so we can continue with the business of the board. We have spent an awful lot of time on this, so if we could wrap this up, I certainly would appreciate it, because we have people looking at our meeting, because we have to have a negotiating team together for tomorrow morning, or tomorrow afternoon, and we need to get our committees in order. Ms. Van Twyver, I'm sorry you've already spoken twice. Do you have something brief?
I was gonna move the previous question.
Thank you.
So we are voting on the motion to amend the Nashua directors
I didn't hear a second.
to have,
I second it.
Have you second
okay.
it? I don't think this motion to move, you need a second?
Required, no.
I don't think it does.
So we are voting on the amendment, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Kaufman's amendment is to have 3 directors.
I believe it was Ms. Hohensee,
I'm sorry.
and I did second it.
Ms. Hohensee's, which was seconded by Mr. Kaufman, is to have 3 directors, Ms. Timmons, Mr. Kaufman, Ms. Hohensee. Yes vote would mean we have 3, a no vote would mean we just have 1, Ms. Timmons. Mr. Moshe, how do you vote?
Just a minute, we have to vote on moving the motion first. Okay?
Okay.
Point of order, he said directors. The director is the negotiation team, but the motion had nothing to do with the board members being directors.
Excuse me, one person at a time?
Yeah, I believe what was recited by the clerk was just not clear to me in terms of what we're voting on. It has to do with the director representatives by the board on that committee, but the way it was read by the clerk confused me in that he was talking about the members being directors is what I understood. So I'd appreciate a clarified motion.
It will be clarified when the motion comes up, but at this point, we're voting on moving the motion.
Okay.
Okay?
Voting to vote.
And it was
This vote is to take up the vote for take up the amendment.
to move the motion.
Move the motion. Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie.
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver.
Yes.
Mr. Guarino, yes. So the motion carries. So now we take up the amendment. Okay, and I'll read it again. And the motion is to amend the number of negotiators to 3 to include for the national directors. For Ms. Timmons, Mr. Kaufman, Ms. Hohensie. A yes vote would have 3, a no vote would have just 1. So, Mr. Mosher,
No.
Ms. Oden,
No.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
No.
Ms. Timmons,
No.
Ms. Hohensee,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino, no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 noes and 3 yeses. So it stays at one person as negotiator. The amendment fails.
Mr. Kaufman?
Motion to adjourn.
Pardon me.
We
Point
have,
of order.
One more. We have another, we have more business.
Sorry.
Madam President, just for clarification, who's going to be the representative for the directors for negotiations?
Ms. Timmons.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam President,
Mr.
just for clarification, so the board is aware that what is going on with the principal negotiations is what has started before the election and has continued through this election to this new board. So the principals have continued their commitment with negotiating with the chair, the president, and with the superintendent as well. If that needs to be voted on right now, I think for transparency purposes, I think that would be just so that it's all clear, Madam Chair.
So I'm looking for a motion to, Ms. Van Twyver?
I move to approve the the president of the Board of Education and the superintendent to be the committee for the negotiations of the principal's contract.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Timmons. And could you read the motion again?
Discussion.
Just a minute, discussion, I'm sorry. Discussion? Discussion?
Yes, thanks. I have no problem with the board selecting one member and Dr. Mosley being part of that team, but my experience on negotiation committees says that we usually rely on Mr. Donovan, and by the motion, the way it's structured now, in a sense, we are leaving him out, which I would think would be short-sighted. I think the committee has formed with clearly the discretion to pull in other resources. By the way this is worded, I believe we would exclude Mr. Donovan or someone to do the numbers for us, which is a key part of every negotiation and consideration.
Okay. I'm gonna ask Ms. O'Gara if she can speak to how those negotiations, I don't know if Mr. Kaufman was here earlier when we talked about most of the people we negotiate, the bargaining units, we have one board member. I think for the custodians, in the past, you've had one member, Secretary of Food Service, that was Ms. Van Twyver. And now the directors and for the principals. So can you speak to that as the HR director?
Well, I can speak to the fact that Mr. Donovan is a resource person for us, and in the end, he does the sheet that comes out that goes to the Board of Aldermen. He does that. Like for the teachers, I gave him, every teacher negotiation, we give him the grid, I give him my spreadsheets, and then he does up the numbers. So that no matter what, Mr. Donovan will always be there as a resource to us in any of these negotiations.
Thank you. And Dr. Mosley, you want to speak to that?
Couple of things.
Mhm.
Part of this negotiation is working as a team, as Mr. Donovan was a resource to us during the NTU, as he will be a resource to all of these negotiations. He will be active in making sure that the post numbers work within the budget confines. Ms. O'Gara was instrumental in making sure that the steps and salaries and the number of years and steps were consistent with the negotiations for the NTU. And we're currently looking at that for all of our bargaining units as well. Ms. O'Gara was this person responsible for the one that we're currently using right now for the NTU. And these same challenges in terms of steps and lanes for our administrators also exist. So with that said, when there's a question about salary, there's a question about any type of compensation that's going to be adjusted or anything like that, both Ms. O'Gara and Mr. Donovan will be actively involved in that as well. So it's not done in a vacuum. And to reiterate the points that I made earlier, that all contracts will be presented to the board for scrutiny as well as approval.
Anybody else? Yes? We will have a roll call. Could you reread the motion?
Motion is to approve the negotiation team with the principals to include superintendent and the president. Is that correct?
That's correct.
President of the board.
Mhm. Roll. Yeah, did you hear that, Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mosher.
Yes.
Ms. Oden.
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman.
Yes.
Ms. Raymond.
Yes.
Ms. Timmons.
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee.
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver.
Yes.
And Mr. Greeno, yes. So the motion carries.
Okay, so we are back to, do we have a main motion that anybody has made here?
I'm not sure
Point
if
of
we made,
information, please.
A point of information, yes.
Could you tell me what the PDMP/TDEC is?
Professional Development Master Plan. That was for the teachers when they were redoing the evaluation, I believe, and observation forms. So you might want to explain it a little bit better than I did. And I at one point I knew what TDEC was, but I don't now.
That's
Could you
a T-
explain those?
Yes, Madam President. I think that the two assistant superintendents could speak to it better, but TDEC is the Teacher Evaluation Committee, and the PDMP is a master plan document for our professional development in the district, which has to be approved by the New Hampshire Department of Ed.
Ms. Van Twyver,
I don't,
follow-up.
just a quick, another point of information. I don't remember us ever having a committee, a board member on that committee.
I believe there was. I remember going to meetings in the beginning because I had just left the teaching profession and there was somebody on it. I cannot remember, but I believe there was somebody on that committee.
I don't remember us ever asking him to, that be one, but if you want one.
Well, that committee does not need board approval. It's just somebody who volunteers or states they would like to be on it. As I understand it, originally it was two separate committees and they now are combining it into one committee.
It's professional development. Thank you. And teacher evaluation.
So do we have a main motion on the floor?
I don't believe I heard a motion to accept the negotiations as amended, unless anybody else has heard otherwise. I didn't hear a motion. So I think we need a motion to accept the negotiations as amended. For teachers, that would be Ms. Van Twyver, Ms. Timmons. For custodians, that would be Mr. Mosher, with Mr. Timmons as alternate. Secretaries would be Ms. Oden. Food service would be Ms. Van Twyver, and directors would be Ms. Timmons. So I believe we need a motion.
Principals,
And for principals.
That already passed. We already have that. A separate motion.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. No problem.
Okay. You wanted to speak,
Madam
Ms.
President, I don't want to belabor this, but do we have somebody for Paris?
They're not out. They're not
No,
out.
because they just
Just
negotiated
recently
that.
renewed. You're right,
And
okay, yep. Thank
that
you.
was one person, Mr. Hollowell,
Mhm.
did that.
Mhm.
So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So I would make a motion to accept these as amended, as I just read off.
Second.
discussion?
I can-
You
yes,
can speak
I
to
can
the
speak on
motion.
the motion. I think that the president of the board has spent a lot of time, of her own time, and put a lot of effort into trying to give us all of our, what we've wanted to do for this board. And I think we owe her a thank you for what she's done, because it's not an easy task to try to put a team together, and I think the time has come where we need to move this along and to start doing the hard work. So I would hope that everybody on the board would vote in favor of this.
Before we go on, I give somebody else here. Mr. Mosier, I don't want to forget you. Do you have anything you would like to say at this time?
Well, I agree with the last statement there that the board chair is a very job and a very hard job, and it requires a lot of time and effort, and also the ability to smooth out the ruffled feathers. So I'll agree to that.
Anybody else like to speak? I guess, Ms. O'Hensi?
I'd like to volunteer for that last group, the PD, MP.
Okay.
That does
Do
not
we have a
require.
motion on the floor?
That does not require board approval, and there's a
But
motion.
that's great.
Anybody that wanted to speak to it? I will speak to it. As an elected member of this board, I have one vote, same as all other members. Having been elected president by the majority of members for the next year, I have the added charge of presiding over meetings and having this board function collaboratively, respectfully, and efficiently. Also, the president has the responsibility of appointing members to subcommittees and the chairs of those committees. 3 members and 1 alternate are required on all 4 of our subcommittees. The process for appointing committees has been in place for many years, and I followed that same procedure. Each member received a preference sheet to guide me as president in assigning members to the 4 subcommittees. All members had the opportunity to submit 4 choices in order of their preferred committees. Some members identified 4 choices, while others chose to name fewer. I am happy to say that I was able to assign every member on this board to the committee they identified as their first choice. Each committee was assigned at least 1 new board member and 1 incumbent. The intent is to have continuity along with new perspectives and ideas on each committee. When selecting the chairperson for each subcommittee, I did so with the intent for committees to work smoothly and efficiently. I considered previous board experience of incumbent members while taking into consideration the educational and work experience of newly elected members when appointing the chairs. I believe we are fortunate to have some members who have past experience in particular areas that give them the background and ability to chair a committee. We have incumbents with many years of board experience who will also chair committees. Regardless of criticism or critique of the results of the assignments to subcommittees and the chair of those committees, I believe we have successfully created a quality committee structure for this board. Call the vote.
The vote to accept the motion. Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee?
Yes?
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
And Mr. Guarino, yes. And the motion carries unanimously.
Looking for another motion? It is.
Excuse me.
Motion to go adjourn.
Right, we still have that last section, and I believe Ms. Hohensie wanted to volunteer for something.
That doesn't need board approval?
Well, can she volunteer?
Sure, I
Put it down.
I wrote her name down.
Oh, you did? All
Okay,
right, thank you.
I'm set.
Ms. Timmons had a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
Nobody wants to leave? Roll?
Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
We have to do a
Mr.
roll call.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mr.
Did I
Mr.
hear?
Mosher, you want to adjourn?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Coughlin?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Van Flyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino, yes. So motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 7:25.